Today on Mother Mayhem, you learn to expect that friendships will either end or that you'll end up being rejected. And that has likely made you hyper aware of any signs of criticism or of conflict. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the narcissistic abuse recovery podcast for daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray. And today I get to introduce you to Pia. I am so grateful to Pia for sharing her story with us because I know her story is the same story a lot of you have. After a turbulent childhood filled with a lot of disconnects, ruptures, and incidents of neglect, Pia finds connection for herself really hard. It's the thing she wants most in the world, but also Pia struggles with crippling social anxiety. The more she looks at this, the more she tries to shift and move through the world differently, the more she struggles, and this makes a lot of sense to me. We've heard this same dynamic echoed in so many of the letters we've received on the show, and I see this in my own clinical practice too. So many women who are healing from early childhood mother wounds find themselves largely isolated and alone in their adult lives. Some might just have a small circle of friends themselves. Sometimes it's just them and their partners and their kids. And other women will find themselves entirely alone and largely isolated. Sometimes this is because of avoidant patterns, and other times it's the natural consequence that comes with clearing the house of toxic people. Daughters, when they're healing, learn to let go of toxic, but then they find it painfully hard to build and connect inside of healthy relationships with other people. My observation is that many people healing from childhood trauma are simultaneously craving connection and meaningful relationships, while also fearing them at the same time with the same intensity. The thing they want most in the world is the thing that scares them the most. And that's what makes so much sense to me. I'm going to walk Pia and all of you through why that is. And of course, I want to offer all of you steps that you can take to do something about it, because all of you deserve to have healthy, loving connections in your lives. It's always going to be my goal to first help you connect with yourselves so you can then connect with others. Now, Pia, I want to take a quick second here to explain how I came up with your names. When I was thinking of flowers to name you after, I thought about peonies. Peonies are one of my favorite flowers, and I always notice how tightly held to themselves they are when they are in that initial bud form before they bloom. Now, I have a rose bush in my backyard, and those roses, they show their beauty right away. You can see their colors in their bud form, and they grab attention right away, whether or not they've bloomed. Peonies, well, they're a little different to me. In bud form, they have this super tight circle, and they are perfectly curled into themselves, perfectly round and tight. But holy hell, what a thing of beauty they become when they are in bloom. Just gorgeous. But that expansion from bud to bloom is significant. And that's what we're talking about with you today. Today, we're talking about how expansion and connection to others can be so painful, can feel so intense, and so dramatic. And here's another cool fact about peonies. Y'all didn't know you were going to get gardening lessons when you started this podcast, did you? They do pretty okay on their own, but my husband's grandmother, because I am not the gardener in this relationship by a country mile, my husband's grandmother tells me that they do better when they're paired with others. And that seems pretty fitting for our discussion here, too. So, Pia, That's how you got your mayhem name. Here's your letter, and I'm going to find you on the other side. Hi, Heather. We've messaged before, but I can't help but come back and ask another question I've been wondering about for some time now. I've had a very tumultuous childhood. My parents constantly fought, leaving them partially separated for most of my childhood. My mom would leave us with our father every evening after dinner and would return home only to take us to school and pick us up before leaving again for the night. She was always gone for the entire weekend and most holidays. We never really knew where she was or who she was staying with. They told us she was staying with a friend, but we were never allowed to meet this friend or see where my mom was living when she wasn't at home with us. It was terribly traumatic for me and my siblings to never really know where my mom was and who she was with or when she would return. These were the days before cell phones or caller ID, so we had no way to get a hold of her or see what phone number she would call us from that we could later return her call. This went on from about when I was in grade school to junior high. She later returned when I was in high school because I believe I started getting into a lot of trouble. Our high school years were filled with a lot of anger and a lot of yelling. My mom was constantly mad. What she was constantly mad about, you might ask? Cleaning. She had and still has this obsessiveness over cleaning every single day. Every day, we were forced to clean for hours to appease my mom. The house was always filthy, and we could never clean it enough. In the summers, we would wake to the sound of the vacuum and her yelling at us to get up. We were always characterized as being lazy because we slept too late and we weren't helping her. We were only ever allowed to sleep in until about 10. Once woken, we would have to eat quickly before the hours of cleaning would begin. I learned quickly to just keep my head down and do as I was told. Don't argue or you would get her wrath. I became your classic fawner, running to my mom to see which chore needed to be done next to keep her happy. There was no fun in our household. After cleaning, we would spend hours on video games and TV. We never went anywhere or did anything together. My siblings and I would lock ourselves into our individual rooms for the entire day and watch TV in our rooms. There was no family unity, no time spent together. All of these events, I believe, led to some pretty intense social anxiety. Most of my school years were marked with very little friends. In the fourth grade, I had made 2 friends, but the friendships never lasted because we were not allowed to go to our friends' houses, or they were never allowed to come to our house. In fifth grade, I made a friend that lived across the street, but it was only out of convenience. She was so mean to me, and her brothers would steal our money that we had earned by washing cars to buy cigarettes and weed. Junior high was the best. I made a large group of friends, but ended up getting into trouble with them for skipping school and eventually wasn't allowed to hang out with them. High school was awful. I got into trouble again for skipping school at the beginning of high school, and my mom told me I was no longer allowed to hang out with these friends either. After that, I had 0 friends for the rest of my high school years. It was terribly lonely. As an adult, I've made some good friends, but in all of my good friendships, 3 that I can think of, we got into some intense fights and these friendships ended abruptly. So now I really have only 1 friend and we rarely see each other anymore. I find that my social anxiety has intensified over the last year. This past year has been a really difficult year for me. I ended up confronting many of my family members for not respecting my boundaries and taking advantage of me. Thanks to you and your podcast for helping me do this. This has left these relationships even more strained than usual, and now I don't have a close relationship with any of my family members. But I'm okay with that because most of them weren't healthy relationships to begin with. I find that since last year, however, my social anxiety has been a lot worse. I've been socially anxious since I was a young child, but it's turned into a beast recently. It's such intense feelings when I'm around people I don't know well. My throat gets dry, my heart races, my face flushes, and I can't think of anything to say. I've been in therapy for 6 years and I still suffer greatly from social anxiety. It is so painful. I so badly want to meet friends and have people I can spend time with and bond with, especially since I don't have any close relationship with any of my family members. My question is this: is there any way to fix my social anxiety? Please help me understand why I'm so socially anxious and will I always be this way? Thank you so much for taking the time to read my email. Your podcast has truly helped me through some extremely difficult moments. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Oh, Pia, I'm so glad you found Mayhem. I am so glad you are here. You belong here. It is for sure, most definitely, a club that no one asked to be a member of, but you most certainly do belong here. And yes, I want to help you make sense out of all of this. And I'll do the very best I can. Now, I gave some thought and consideration as to how to best approach this conversation for all of you because I do know it's a sore spot. When we discuss social anxiety, it is important to recognize that we're also simultaneously talking about trauma brain. The state of mind can trigger responses like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn whenever there's a hint of change or uncertainty. Trauma can really impact how our brains function, and it often leads to heightened sensitivity to the perceived threats that you might find in social situations. This isn't just about being shy. It's a conditioned response where your brain is trying to protect you based on your past experiences. My goal in trying to talk to you about this and everyone listening is to keep you grounded and wise mind for this discussion. And to do that, I have to tread a little bit carefully here so that you don't feel triggered, get overwhelmed, or reconsider your desire for change. It's important to reassure both your trauma brain and the trauma brains of everyone here listening that it's okay. We're taking this together one step at a time. We're not going to put you in unsafe situations. You're safe here, and we're focused on helping you gain healthy control over your life. Understanding this connection is going to allow you to approach your social anxiety with more compassion, recognizing for yourself that it is a valid response that is rooted in your own personal experiences. This is one of the ways we're able to achieve this together. So, as you've heard me say so many times on the show, it is okay to remind yourselves that you are in this conversation by choice, that you, in wise mind, have recognized that you are ready to change. You get to say when, you get to say where, and Pia and everyone listening, you get to say stop. If this gets to be too much or start to feel too hairy scary, you can always take a beat. You can always walk away and you can always come back to it. First, I just really need to say that your social anxiety is not a defect of yours. It is not something that's wrong with you. At one point in time, the roots of your social anxiety protected you from all of the inconsistency you were experiencing while you were growing up. That's why, even though it's hurting you right now, we're grateful for your brain's instinct to protect you, to keep you safe. It's creating distance for you now, and I get that. And I want to help you turn the dial down on that a little bit. But first, we do have to appreciate what your brain has done for you so far. This way, when we do tell your anxiety to stand down for a hot second, it will believe you more. You're recognizing its purpose, assuring it that you've got it, and this is going to allow for you to find and maintain calm more consistently in your own life. Your brain absolutely developed these responses as a way to cope with the unpredictability and instability of your early environment. When your mom was frequently absent, of course, it created a deep sense of abandonment and of insecurity. Without the ability to reach out to her, you were left to navigate a world that was filled with even more uncertainty and even more things that were unknown to you. And I'm sure you created so many stories in your head about what was going on. And I imagine little girl Pia also wondered a lot if maybe she was the problem, if she was the reason her mom had to leave, if perhaps she was too much. We know you daughters, when you were younger, many of you internalized so many of your mom's behaviors. We know that you likely absorbed this message that you were the problem, and we hate that little girl Pia had that experience. Of course, us and our adult wise minds, we know that it was never little girl Pia's fault that her mom was gone. The fact that little girl Pia doesn't feel safe out in the world now makes sense. So we have to teach her that it's okay. And we first want to do this by helping her understand herself and her reactions a little bit more. The instability that your mom created profoundly affected how you formed attachments and relationships later in life. And as a result, yes, you find it now challenging to trust others and to feel steady in social situations. These early experiences can lay the groundwork for that social anxiety you're living with. As your mind learned to associate social interactions with that potential danger or unpredictability, it was a protective mechanism. Your brain was trying to keep you safe and is still trying to keep you safe by anticipating possible threats. However, once what served as a shield sometimes now is becoming a barrier to connection. It's making it harder for you to engage with others and form those meaningful connections. And recognizing that your anxiety stems from those early life abandonment patterns can bring up so many mixed up feelings. And don't be surprised, Pia, if you start to get a little pissed. After all, because of your mom's messed up choices, you are still struggling as an adult. I want you to understand yourself. And one of the things that you might have to come to understand here is that you have a lot of good and valid reasons to be pissed. And being pissed is okay. Our feelings are just energy, and you can use that energy however you want. Right now, that energy is being used to keep you tightly wound up and balled into yourself like that peony bud. We can also use that energy to help you expand, to help you connect, to help you reach out. And Pia, deep breath here, because part of helping you understand the roots of all of this and how trauma brain is on the scene creating your social anxiety means looking at the fawn response. Growing up, you learn to constantly seek your mom's approval. You try to appease her to avoid conflict and maintain a sense of safety. And in a home filled with so much unpredictability, this survival behavior was necessary. It makes sense. It helped you navigate a chaotic environment and minimize any potential outbursts. However, as you grew older, this same fawning response now likely contributes to the social anxiety you're experiencing today. When you grow up in intensely emotional experiences and conditions where confrontation feels dangerous, your instinct to fawn becomes that key coping mechanism. You might find yourself feeling the need to keep the peace and manage everyone's emotions, often at the expense of your own needs. And this can lead to something I often refer to as over functioning. You feel like you must constantly monitor how others are feeling. And then, in turn, you find yourself adjusting your behavior to fit in or to be accepted. In social settings, this pattern can create a lot of anxiety. The fear of conflict or disapproval ends up looming before you and makes regular everyday interactions feel overwhelming and exhausting. You probably catch yourself second guessing your thoughts and your feelings. This makes it really hard to express your true self. This fear of rocking the boat or triggering negative reactions ends up holding you back from forming genuine connections. Fawning helped you survive in childhood, but it doesn't serve you in the same way now. It's possible to learn how to prioritize your own needs and set healthy boundaries. And we want this for you so that you're able to shift away from this pattern and create more authentic relationships. Now, you heard me say earlier, my main goal in this and my main wish for the all of like what I'm doing here and my wish for all of you with mayhem is that I'm able to teach you how to have better relationships with yourselves so you can have better relationships with other people. We don't have to have that first part completed, that task of connecting with yourself before you start connecting with others, but we do need some foundational skill building. And I want to offer you a little bit of that today. Pia, I want to take a second here to reflect on the intense loneliness you experienced during your childhood. Being isolated from your peers and facing constant restrictions on your friendships can profoundly affect your ability to connect with other people as an adult. Perhaps you heard me share my own struggles with this on the show a time or two. I wasn't allowed to have friends outside of school when I was growing up. And before college, I was in a lot of forced isolation. And then suddenly, because it was time, I was dropped off in college and expected to just be able to make friends like it was no big deal. And it was a big deal. I failed miserably at it and sometimes still fail miserably at it a time or two. I get that struggle that you've been in. And if you were anything like me, you have likely felt like you were on the outside looking in. And I know all too well how that leads to a deep sense of loneliness. And I've felt how lasting that feeling is. It's always seemed to linger way after my early years of growing up. Your isolation likely contributed to challenges in developing social skills and in setting boundaries. When you're not given the opportunity to practice these basic skills that, come with growing up, it gets to be tough to navigate social situations later in life. Of course, it's hard to engage in conversations, and I get why you might fear that you'll say the wrong thing, which only serves to amplify that social anxiety. Additionally, here, your earlier experiences with rejection and disappointment in friendships created really intense relational insecurities. You learn to expect that friendships will either end or that you'll end up being rejected. And that has likely made you hyper aware of any signs of criticism or of conflict. Just like you probably did with your mom, you probably scan 10 miles ahead for threats, for risk, for changes, so you are able to shift at a moment's notice to be whoever other people need you to be. And as you're learning, this sensitivity makes it even harder to form new connections. Loneliness isn't just about feeling lonely. It's about how these feelings shape your view of relationships and your view of yourself, as well as your ability to trust other people. You might be hesitant to open up or to let others in, fearing that they'll abandon you or that you're just going to end up disappointed again. And if you'll allow me to, I now want to connect those early experiences you had with connection, friendships, and relationships as a kid and help you see that connection to your struggles now as an adult. I know that this kind of explanation feels tedious. Honestly, it's feeling a little bit tedious for me to say this. And maybe it's even obvious. But again, everyone, ladies, be with me in this. We're talking about trauma brain, and we need your trauma brain to know that you have this. And the best way we can calm trauma brain down and cue dysregulation to take a step back is to be able to see and show your trauma brain that you understand this and that you understand it, that you understand your trauma brain and your social anxiety is only there to protect you, and that you are ready and capable of taking that task over. Losing adult friendships to intense conflict is obviously painful and dysregulating, and it creates so much fear and it makes us second guess ourselves when it happens. Your early environment was filled with conflict, unpredictability. So, of course, you are going to react more strongly to disagreements or perceived threats in friendships. In those moments, it probably felt like the stakes were exceptionally high whenever there was even a whisper of conflict. And that created this big, wide open door for fear, panic, and anxiety to just stroll in and take hold. And when you're navigating relationships from a heightened sense of urgency, it is so hard to navigate disagreements with any sense of calm. You might have overreacted. You might have withdrawn. Or you might have confronted your friends in ways that left you feeling misunderstood and even likely more isolated. You've heard me talk on the show before how these are the patterns that stem from those attachment wounds, where your early experiences with your parents shaped how you view and respond to relationships in your present day. When conflicts happen, it can trigger those old feelings of insecurity or that fear of abandonment. You might have worried that a disagreement could mean the end of a friendship. And when that happens, trauma brain swoops in, offers you a way out, either by fighting or fleeing. And that response has been so ingrained in you over time that it happens automatically before you even realize it. This reaction can manifest as emotional outbursts, distancing yourself, or even shutting down altogether. Maybe, most likely, a little cocktail of all of the above. The good news here is that you're not stuck with these patterns. But before we talk about breaking them, I think we have to look at another pattern you might be dealing with. Pia, I know you've probably analyzed the endings of those friendships and conflicts to kingdom come, but I'm wondering while you were going down any of those rabbit holes, did you ever consider the role of your picker? You've heard me discuss in previous episodes how the way you, as daughters, choose friends and partners can often be influenced by your past experiences and your emotional conditioning. Sometimes, oftentimes, without you even realizing it. You may find yourself subconsciously drawn to people who replicate the patterns that you experience with your mom. This could mean connecting with other individuals who exhibit that same come hither, go away tendency that your mom had, making you feel both drawn to and anxious about at the same time. These relational patterns can intensify the conflicts that you experience. While it's true that you might play a role in these dynamics, It's also really crucial, and my advice to you, to also understand that the individuals you chose as your friends may not have been capable of that kind of healthy communication. That might have been one of the things that made them feel familiar to you. And while it felt familiar and maybe even like the devil you knew, it was also something you can control. Those friendships likely replicated the same cycles of conflict and instability that your mom created. And all of this only becomes even more true when we look at what has happened since you started setting boundaries and asserting yourself with your family. Yes, you can see the distance that got created is likely a good thing, but also your trauma brain is learning that when you set boundaries, you lose more. That's only going to make making connections even more confusing for you because you don't yet have that experience of knowing that boundaries are actually the way we teach people how to be in relationship with us. Okay, Pia, everyone listening, thank you so much for sitting with me through that part of the conversation. I tried so hard to edit it down. I know it got tedious, but those points, I know they're laborious and they might even be things y'all already knew and probably heard me say a gazillion times on the podcast. But we need to lay the groundwork in this way so that you understand how you got here so that now we can get you finally, thank goodness, to somewhere different. I'm about to walk you through something that psychobabblers like myself call cognitive restructuring. Doesn't that sound so much fun and not at all intimidating? But basically, this is the bread and butter of what I do. You guys have been hearing me talk on the podcast how I'm learning about polyvagal work. But before I went down polyvagal rabbit holes, I was very down deep in cognitive restructuring rabbit holes. So basically, what we're trying to do here, everyone, is get your brain to connect new experiences to things that would ordinarily feel intimidating and scary for you. And as you get more and more anxious in your life, you have perceived more and more threats to your safety and your security. When that happens, your brain starts scanning through more and more evidence that the threat is scary and something to be avoided. So you started to get nervous about making connections, and your brain started endlessly scanning for all of the reasons why you were right to be scared. All of the evidence for why connections are so bad and so scary. So now, to counteract all of this, we need to start training your brain to collect evidence for why, at some point, likely in your childhood, that was true. But that you're older now, that you have more control, that you have more of a say, and that many of the threats have lessened or gone away altogether. We need your trauma brain to catch up on that fact. And we're talking about building up your wise mind so that it can feel stronger and more capable. So, the psychobabble word, cognitive restructuring, all it really means is challenging the negative thoughts that come up for you regarding your social experiences. Instead of collecting evidence for why it's so bad and so awful, we start collecting the evidence that shows it's going to be okay, that you aren't going to die, that you are capable of engaging with others. When you notice anxious thoughts, pause and ask yourself, is this thought based on facts or assumptions? And reframe those thoughts into more realistic, positive statements. I want to break it down for you. Here's some examples. Again, keep notebooks handy, my friends. Instead of thinking, everyone will judge me, start trying to consider and talking back to that thought. Most people are focused on themselves, just like I am. You might be telling yourself, Or you might have a story that goes something like, I always mess up in social situations. Instead, the new thought we want you practicing is, I may have had challenges in the past, but I've also had positive interactions. I can learn from each experience. One story y'all might find yourselves carrying might sound something like, I can't handle it if someone criticizes me. Instead, I encourage you to start telling yourselves, I can handle feedback when delivered respectfully, and I can use it to improve. Pia, after all of this self imposed isolation, you might be carrying around a false belief that tells you, no one wants to talk to me. I'll just be ignored. Instead, we're going to work on getting you to start telling yourself, I don't know what others are thinking. There are many potential connections to be made, and I can initiate conversations. A lot of social anxiety can come down to a fear of making mistakes or of saying the wrong thing. Instead of watering that particular garden and letting those particular thoughts grow, let's try getting you to tell yourself making mistakes is a part of being human. Most people are understanding and empathic. Anytime you are thinking about going out or doing something, you might have to pay attention to how you're talking to yourself. You might have a habit of automatically telling yourself that you can't do it, that it would be too overwhelming. Then you end up in that spiral, thinking of all the ways it would be too much, the traffic, the decisions you'd have to make, the small talk you'd have to endure. And instead, we want you saying to yourself, I can take it one step at a time. I can leave if I feel uncomfortable. I have control over my choices. And after a really long struggle with this, you might have resigned this thought inside you that says you shouldn't even try because it's been this hard forever and it can't possibly get any better. Instead, we want you thinking, sure, of course, I might feel anxious, but that doesn't define my ability to engage. I can practice and gradually get more comfortable. Everything I am walking you through here, Pia, is the bread and butter of my own foundational training as a therapist. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy. Connected to cognitive behavioral therapy is also something called exposure therapy. And that is when, y'all are shaking in your shoes now, oh my anxious ladies, mere thought of this, I'm sure you hear exposure therapy and you're like, I'm turning off the podcast now. But what we're talking about here is that when you're with your therapist, with structure and with intent, you are going to slowly expose yourself to the things that you're afraid of in organized and structured ways so that you can start to change your body's response to the things that freak you out. Perhaps you can have your therapist move away from talk and processing and ask to be guided through some of this exposure work. There are a lot of exercises you can try. Your therapist probably knows a few in her back pocket or his back pocket. But that was so sexist of me just to assume you were seeing a woman. There are a lot of exercises here that you can try. I don't want to overwhelm you. I'm just going to list a few of them out, but you and your therapist can always look some up and decide together which ones you think might be the right ones for you. I'm going to start small here and I'm going to give you the task of practicing eye contact. The goal with eye contact practice here is we're just trying to get you comfortable with making eye contact because oftentimes it's the eye contact that ends up triggering anxiety in social situations. So let's break this down into steps together. We might start by holding eye contact with your therapist or with a friend or somebody you trust, a family member, or if you're not even there yet, I've done this with some clients before, and I've even done this in session. It doesn't work for virtual sessions that I do now. I used to do this in my brick and mortar private practice. But practicing making eye contact with your own reflection in the mirror and holding that eye contact for a few seconds. So you and your therapist could do this. You can make a decision that you're going to practice making eye contact with 3 people in between sessions that you have with your therapist. But gradually over time, you are working on increasing the duration, and then you're practicing making brief eye contact with strangers or a barista or a cashier at the grocery store. Another way to practice this, we're like getting super basic, super simple, working to set you up for success. You might try complimenting a stranger. The goal in this is to help you build confidence in approaching and connecting with others in a low risk way. Who doesn't like being complimented? Right? Like, most people are not going to call you an asshole bark at you for complimenting, even though I do have one fantastic story. I was smiling in a grocery store one time. I'm totally going on a tangent here, but you guys will like this one. So, this is back on the East Coast. I was grocery shopping one day, and so I'm like wandering down, going down the aisle, and I like make eye contact with this woman and I smile and say hello. And she goes, I don't see what's so good about being in the grocery store on a Sunday or something stupid like that. And I was from Massachusetts at the time, and we call them mass holes. And I promise you, mass holes are a real thing. So I took my shopping cart and I pulled it back against me, and then I shoved my cart into hers and was like, "Hey, does that make you feel better?" She kind of laughed at herself and she's like, "I guess so." And we moved on our merry way. But honestly, Pia and all of you who are shaking in your shoes listening to this story, most strangers are not going to be royal assholes if you say, "Hey, like, what a pretty skirt you're wearing today," or "Wow, like, you took care of me so quickly. Thank you for such good service. Thank you for getting my order right." Nobody is going to snap at you, growl at you, create some moment of discomfort because you've simply complimented them. So when you're looking to re-engage with the world for the first time, making a kind statement is usually not going to have you knocked on your ass. So again, let's, all seriousness here, tangents aside, we're going to start simple with genuine compliments. And we're going to say something like, "I like your jacket," to someone at the grocery store. And as your comfort builds, you might try complimenting more people in different environments, like when you're walking in the park or when you're at a coffee shop. Another example might be used to getting to participate in small talk. And if we're breaking that one down, we're starting with easy comments. So the ever popular talking about the weather with a coworker or asking someone about their weekend plans. And gradually, then you can work up to longer conversations with people you don't know as well. Hopefully, as I'm talking and walking you through this, you get the point a little bit. We are starting super small, but we're working on these examples over and over until they become second nature, until your exposure to them, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, see what I did there? That's why it's called exposure therapy, doesn't cause you fear, alarm, or that desire to pull back. I like to encourage my clients to establish routines when they are working on connecting to other people more. Social anxiety throws so many unknowns at you all sometimes, and it can be really overwhelming. But if you can start to create rituals and routines around them, you are going to feel safer and things will feel more orderly and predictable. You might try using positive affirmations. Those restructured thoughts I just offered you earlier about "I am capable, not everyone this," you can turn those inside out and they can become your affirmations. You can try listening to calming music, or maybe the opposite way, your brain needs music that pumps you up a little bit. My nephew is a goalie for hockey and he has a He has like a pumped up playlist that gets him going before he gets out on the ice. All of that nervous energy, it needs to go somewhere. So you might find that before engaging with others, you need to do a little bit of physical activity. You might need to physically shake your body and release that tension. Reminds me a little bit, Pia, not to make direct connections here, but my dog is super anxious and my dog physically shakes itself all the time to release itself of tension. And I regularly tell people to physically shake to release themselves of tension. You can go into a public bathroom. You can do it in your car. You can go behind a building. You can do it in your house before you leave, but give yourself permission to physically release that tension from your body. Maybe you need to go for a walk or take the stairs or do some jumping jacks. Anything you can do that can provide a sense of control and reduce the anxiety is going to help you. Just by making the decision to do these things and try these things and to make this commitment to not lean into your social anxiety, to not let your social anxiety win, might be enough to create the change you so desperately want in your life. And I don't think there's ever going to be a single situation that we can ever encounter on this show where, quite frankly, some grounding techniques and mindfulness wouldn't be helpful. And that is especially true here. I would work with yourself on getting super proactive with this and building regular mindfulness practice or activity into your regular everyday so that you can lean on it whenever you're anxious. And don't reserve this just for the moments that bring you anxiety. You're going to be able to pay really close attention to deep breathing, to meditation, to progressive muscle relaxation, all of those things that can manage your anxious symptoms. You can do that when you're feeling calmer, and then you'll have them at the ready when you need them. Those grounding exercises, sometimes they focus on physical sensations. You might find yourself counting objects around you. You can do those things to bring you back to the present moment. And then you'll be able to use them in the moments of anxiety to calm you down faster so that you can start to build your confidence in managing these unpredictable situations. And Pia, I imagine you might relate a lot to Willow, who I talked to a few weeks ago. Her episode, When Pain Starts from the Start, or something like that, episode 66. I walked her through all of these kind of somatic interventions that might work better when talk therapy isn't enough. And quite frankly, in all honesty, your social anxiety might call for a little bit of a different approach, one that is more based in your body than in words alone. And I have to be honest with you, this is stuff I have barely been trained in. So your therapist might not have been trained in it either. You might need some auxiliary services by people who are trained differently than she and I likely were. Again, there I go with the gender expectations, but anyway, you might benefit from something called somatic experiencing, which is body focused therapy that can help process trauma and release pent up anxiety that's been stored in your body. Or you might benefit from what we're calling nervous system regulation, otherwise known as the polyvagal theory you've been hearing me talk about. Both somatic experiencing and polyvagal work have things in common and they go well together, but they're not quite the same thing. So it would be worth looking into both to see if either could be a fit for you. And lastly, you've heard me mention this one too on the show before, EMDR. That's another form of therapy that you can use that interrupts your automatic trauma brain responses so that you can have some help accessing wise mind more easily. And P.S., let's be honest, I don't want you to think that this is like some shameful plug, but I really can't help but invite you to Tuesday group. As you're working on making these changes, you and everyone listening, I don't want you to think that you have to go at it alone or isolated or just in a therapy bubble. In group, there's this unique opportunity to practice these tools in a safe, understanding environment with other women who are navigating similar journeys as you. Group is so special, you guys. I can't even quite get over what it's becoming, but it's this place where you can get practice at challenging those automatic thoughts. You'll get practice at being with and sharing space with other people, and it's still in a virtual setting. So you're in this room with others who also get where you're coming from. And we can support you as you work to build on your own foundation. You're going to be encouraged and you would have company on the path. And Pia, or any of you listening, if this sounds helpful, consider this to be your standing invitation to join us. You can always find a link for that in the show notes. And Pia, I hope you and everyone listening sees what I see here in this conversation. Hope. Pia, I hope you really see that no, you absolutely won't always feel this way. The fact that you've been brave enough to seek support, to reflect on these patterns, and to be open to change already tells me that you're on the path towards change. These strategies and approaches, whether we're going towards the grounding exercises or the exposure exercises or more trauma focused therapy, all of these things are the tools you can use to fundamentally change how you relate to the world around you and how you relate to yourself. Healing from social anxiety, especially when it is rooted in trauma, isn't ever going to be about fixing yourself, but rather it's going to be on connecting or reconnecting with parts of yourself that have been in protective mode for entirely too long. Every step you take, even the smallest one, adds to this foundation of trust and resilience that keeps you growing even more. And as you keep practicing, these shifts are going to become less about conscious effort and more about naturally feeling calm and confident and capable of connecting with others in the way that you want. The road isn't always going to be quick and easy. You heard me do that in the tedious way that I had to lay out all that groundwork for you. But every moment you engage with these tools, every time you practice, and you remind yourself that it is a gradual journey, but it's still forward moving, every bit of progress, no matter how small, it matters. It means something. And as you keep working towards these shifts, you, my friend, are going to experience relationships. You're going to have new experiences, and you are going to start to build a self image that's defined more by connection, more by authenticity, and less by anxiety. There is real, attainable hope here. Healing is possible, change is possible, and you, my friend, are already on your way. Pia, you are in this community of women around the world who are in this with you. You are doing and saying the hard things, and they are doing and saying the hard things right along with you. They are in it with you. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing simple scripts for saying hard things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.